Exploring Healthier Masculinity Within Business, a monthly call for executive and senior leaders within industry who too rarely have a space to stop, to breathe, to take off the weight of being a leader of teams and organizations. Taking place on the first Monday of every month. Email gary.turner@radicality.co.uk.
Hi there. Welcome to the next episode of In the Business of Healthy Masculinity. This is a platform you can find on Substack, Apple. You can also find it on Spotify and on YouTube as well. I'm really grateful to have a whole range of guests, men, women, exploring what does it mean? Who knows what it means to be in the business of healthy masculinity in 2026? And that's why I love guests like Tim Sutton joining me as he is today. How are you, Tim? Welcome to the show.
Excellent, Gary. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Well, look, as we get going today, I would really appreciate it if you could share our viewers, our listeners, just a little bit of an insight as to who is Tim. Big question sometimes, but who is Tim today in 2026,
Today in 2026? Sure. I'm actually probably at a point in my personal path, personal journey, professional journey, where I'm making a bit of a right turn. I've historically been trained as an engineer, picked up a business degree, done a lot of work. It's really kind of commercial focused, strategy focused, engineering, design focused, things like that. Mm-hmm. But I think what I've realized over the years is I don't get as much joy out of that. And I'm in a very fortunate position right now. I do consulting. I've got a great client, one great client that gives me interesting work and allows me a little bit of time to pursue other things. And so I don't know if I even told you, Gary, I'm writing a screenplay right now. So I'm like exercising new muscles and doing things that I've never done before. Writing a screenplay for a prestige horror series based in the UK, up in the north. And so it's been a really lovely chance to kind of keep doing the baseline things I've done, analysis, consulting, things like that, create value. But then also, try something entirely new and experience a little vulnerability and not knowing what I'm doing and what I should be doing, but forging ahead anyway. And so it's an exciting, you would probably describe it as a right turn, and probably not the first one I've made in my career, but probably the most pronounced one. And I'm in, I feel like I'm in a fortunate position that I can do that.
That is so cool. And no, I did not know about that. I really do want to dive into that, Tim. But I'm really curious, if I may ask, why does this particular right turn feel more pronounced, to use your language?
This turn? Why does this turn?
Yeah, this turn. This turn.
Yeah, Gary, I think it's probably just because it's a bigger shift in direction than, I think if I look at my career progression, I would probably define it more serendipitous than designed. I made choices, but I started out in engineering and have been making choices to get into things that are probably less, deterministic and a little bit more, creative. Along the way. And that took me into strategy, where you bring both of those together, right? And it took me into kind of doing a lot of consulting, again, where you bring both of those worlds together, but always with this idea that, and this is probably early programming, that I got in my life is, this was my dad, in the US, there's this thing, the Protestant work ethic, right? This idea that like, we're here to do work, we're here to create value. And I think when I was young, I got a lot of those messages that what you need to be doing is something productive. And my father kind of embodied that and sent me that signal, right? And this might relate to this masculinity question, right? Uh-huh. Is that, as the man that I am, like, that's my job to do something valuable. And so I think all those turns I've made in my career were around, okay, where's the line of sight to something that's going to create value, going to create, security, going to create all those things, again, that I think, whether you're even aware of it, that's what I've been programmed to do. Mm-hmm. I think with this turn in mind, there's a lot bigger question mark of is that really the foundation of this? And the reality is no. I mean, this is just an artistic pursuit, right? And now it's an artistic pursuit that I certainly hope gets to fruition. And if it does get to fruition, then there's value that's created in that. Mm-hmm. But I'm not doing it for that reason. I'm doing it for the pursuit of the outcome, the pursuit of, this is a story that I want to tell. This is a skill, a craft that I want to learn. And you'd be surprised, maybe you wouldn't be surprised, Gary. You probably would understand this more than most. That's a really difficult jump to make, because it feels a little bit irresponsible. It feels a little bit frivolous. It feels a little bit, again, counter to those things, those messages you might have heard growing up. And I think, I'm in a transitional generation where, my father worked in the same company all of his life. That was the norm. The generation I'm in, some people did that, some people didn't, but you tended to like think in terms of longer lifespans in roles. And I think, a lot of younger people in the workforce today, that concept is so foreign, right? So I think some of this is generational pressure. Some of this is probably gender programming, a lot of those things. But, it's a transition that's caused me a little bit of stress, just because, in many ways it means going against things that I've been taught over the years, probably many years ago, were the right choices to make. So yeah, I think it's probably underneath all of it, it just feels a little bit irresponsible, even though my passion is there and I love it.
I love that. It's just, honestly, you've just brought to life this whole platform and the reason it exists in the most beautiful way, Tim. Like, no, but really, just that whole point of, with love, I've been conditioned with, or I've been educated in. And then there's this sort of discomfort of feeling a rebel, right? Sort of going against that sort of learnt behavior and going rebellious. Like, how funny to even use that term, I'm going to do something my own way, and that's rebellious. Yeah,
well, absolutely. I think, again, this is, I tend to be, this is a tension probably I've had all throughout my career is, there's the subconscious level operating of do the responsible thing, right? Do the thing that takes care of the people around you and builds security and yada, yada, yada. But I've always had a bit of a maverick streak or rebellious streak in wanting to push boundaries and do things differently and do things my way. And it creates tension. It creates a lot of tension. And I think this is, the most I've let it kind of play out. And again, I love it. Like what I'm doing right now, I get up in the morning excited. I get up, I go do my run that I got to do for my training. But then when I come home, I start writing, and I get in that pattern of writing. And I've listened to the Stephen King books and how he writes, and Robert McKee and how he writes, and all these books, and absorbing it. But I love to learn. It's a fascinating opportunity to learn. But it does push against things that are deep inside that say, red alert, like, you're getting out of the lane, right? You're getting out of where you need to be to be a responsible person, or, in this case, probably, I don't often think in these gender terms, but probably to be a responsible man, right?
Yeah. It's so interesting, right, Tim, because I resonate so much with this myself, right? It's only been the last decade that I would even contemplate having this conversation, right? I was very, because I didn't see it either, right? I didn't see that I'd been conditioned with, you be the strong one, be the man, don't show weakness, you're not allowed to have feelings, etc. Now, that was never said to me explicitly.
Yeah.
My parents didn't sit me down and go, make sure you never have a feeling. Make sure make sure you never, always make sure you're being the strong one. Always make sure, like this. It's not actually said. It's not explicit. And that's what I find so intriguing around all of this stuff.
Maybe yes, maybe no. I think there are times it's said in different ways. Like, I'd fall down, I'd get a bruise, you start crying and you're said, oh, don't cry, be strong, boys don't cry.
True.
And so there probably is some of that. And again, it's probably said with love. It's probably said to toughen you up, right?
Yeah.
So I think there is some times it sneaks out into the explicit, but probably more times than not, like you said, it's through more subtle means of reinforcement. And certainly like media messages, certainly like, what you see in movies around, what a man is supposed to do and be, all of that contributes to, that image we have.
So intriguing. For anyone that's just listening on the podcast, I just want to let you know, if you want to follow Tim's work, linkedin.com/in/Tim B. Sutton. So tell us a little bit more about the screenplay. Like, this is fresh news for me, and I just want to. I want to love the inspiration. What's the seed for that? Like, has it been like you mentioned about it being a sort of long-term curiosity, or
yes and no. So I love consuming media. I love movies, and well-written, well-developed TV shows, right? And I think early in my career, I spent a lot of time dabbling in writing, but I never necessarily had the courage to pursue it, right? But I mean, I quite literally, Gary was sitting in an airport, sitting in DFW airport, thinking about a movie I love. It's a John Landis movie called American Werewolf in London. So it's from 1981. It was a groundbreaking movie because it was the first movie that was truly horror and comedy and worked on both levels, right? Mm-hmm. And the makeup at the time, I think it won the best the original best makeup Oscar went to that. It was in '81. It went to, Rick, I don't remember Rick's last name, but the makeup artist in the American Werewolf. So this movie has long been like, it was in my formative years. I saw the movie, and I've probably seen it 85 times, and that's not even an exaggeration. Like when I need to concentrate, I'll just put it on in the background, and I can quote it and everything else. So I'm sitting in the airport thinking, how did, and probably a lot of your listeners and viewers don't know the movie itself, but there's a scene where, the village, where one of the characters, David, is injured. The village lets him go to London knowing he's going to become a werewolf. And I'm thinking, how do reasonable people do that? Like, how does a reasonable person allow this to happen, right? There has to be a story. And it was just like a random thought, right? And this is how, like, so many great things or interesting things happen and turns happen. It was just this thought I had. And I started like thinking, well, what is the story? Like, what could have led to that, right? And this whole storyline started to come together that I found really interesting. And so, I just kind of let the story emerge. And this is what, again, a lot of writers will tell you is like, you create these characters, you create this situation they're in, and then you let the story unfold. Let them, like, it's almost like you're channeling their story. But I really got into that and started thinking through, how did this really, like, how did we get to here? How did this happen? What could have the backstory been, and everything else, and ended up just, over probably a month or two, as I had time, just building out this over 8 episodes, this whole story that kind of what I would call as a spiritual successor to American Werewolf in London, right? And it tells the story before, how it got to the events of the movie, and kind of the after. But it wraps it in this, what I think is a pretty lovely, narrative arc. But the reality is, I don't own the IP to American Werewolf in London, right? The intellectual property is owned by NBC Universal, and so I can write it that way. And then I'm 100% dependent on them saying, yeah, this is a great story, or no, this is not something we're interested in. So what I'm doing instead is basically writing out the entire narrative set with a different setting. And this is there's a lot of precedent in terms of I'm trying to remember the names of them. I think The Nun was written this way. Cloverfield Lane was written this way. They were written as storylines sold to a studio, and the studio said, let's build this into our existing IP. Let's take this and put this into something we already have. Right. And so the gambit is, I'm writing it so it can perfectly plug into the American Werewolf universe, but I've got to write it without using the American Werewolf in London intellectual property, right? And then I can go to the NBC Universals and say, look, this is how this fits into your world. This is why this is such a great thing for your property. And if they say, no, not interested, then okay. Then I go somebody else, and I've got a completely developed story, a completely developed season that stands on its own. Right. And so, yeah, it started just because I have the love of this movie. I love the characters. I wanted to tell their story in a bigger way. And, I've got a friend who, and this is a blessing, really. I've got a friend who owned a production company in Hollywood, who can guide me, who can tell me, this is what you do, this is what you not. Now, he can't write it for me, right? But he can accelerate my learning and put me in a position that, if this work really resonates, it can get in front of the right audience. And so, we'll see how it plays out, but it's every minute of doing it has been a joy. I mean, it's not to say there's not hard, it's not hard, but it's been both a joy and a grind. I think Kimberly can see it and how much more energy I wake up with now since I've been involved in this process.
I've got so many questions, Tim, so many questions. And I think the one that's really popping the most right now is that sort of what seems to be, you can correct or challenge me, what seems to be this interconnection between you being in joy, in flow, in creativity, and how that allows you to show up fully in that space. And that, for me, I don't know what your experience in the workplace, within business settings, that it's not always necessarily an environment where you're allowed to have that level of freedom and flow and creativity, always. And I don't know if that's been your experience of being in sort of corporate business spaces or not. So I don't know what your experience over your sort of work trajectory has been like. Yeah,
there's a very, very real reason, Gary, for the last 5 years I've not worked in a corporate work environment, because it's just not, I think so much of what I was seeing as the sense of agency that you have within a corporate setting, right? Especially, I tended to work in profit-driven organizations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the agency in a profit-driven organization is all around take what you can, right? It's all around, us versus them. And it's what I came to see as kind of negative-based agency, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yes, you are designing things and putting them into the world. You're putting them into the world in some ways to exploit, in some ways to dominate, to capture. And look, I'm not anti-capitalist. I understand a lot of the prosperity I've had in life is because, I was in those roles. But I think, just for me personally, again, it wasn't leading me to a place that was coming from a place of joy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think now I've got the freedom to pursue what I would call kind of, positive-based agency, right? Where I can genuinely, with 100% integrity, say, I'm trying to put something positive into the world, right? And again, look, if this works out, I don't want to be naive about it, right? I'd love to be paid. I'd love to be, compensated for that, sure.
Yeah.
But it's not why I'm doing it. It's not, I'm financially secure enough right now that if it doesn't pay off, it's okay. I'm not betting the farm, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm betting a significant amount of my time and my energy. But I think to me, it's not just about kind of putting yourself in a position in life where you have agency. It's putting yourself in a position that you've got positive agency. You're building toward, let's create something great, instead of let's capture as much as we can, or let's take as much as we can, right? And it's not motivated from a sense of idealism. I think it's just motivated from what I want my days to be about, and what I want my energy to be about, and what I want my contribution to be about. And I'm not saying there aren't corporate environments out there that are the exception, but what I would say is what I've seen is the pendulum has swung much more towards corporate environments that are based on capture, like cut and capture, than they are on kind of like, build and build a great culture, do great things with great people. I think the environment we're in 2025, moving into 2026, is the opposite. It's bottom line driven. And I get it. I don't have a philosophical problem with it. I just don't want to personally spend my days doing it. And, that's kind of just a personal choice I've made.
Oh, I love that. And what's interesting with me still navigating the in corporate space is everything you've said is correct. It's absolutely where it is. And I love this. I love the invitation you're offering, Tim, which is actually, we understand where we are. We've all got agency, but to what extent do we actually, I use the phrase, reclaim it? So I'm choosing to still be in that corporate space for my own reasons. Yeah. But what I'm finding increasingly, yes, I've got the gratitude. Yes, you've got the resourcing. You've got, keep roof over your head. But for me at the moment, Tim, it's a curiosity, particularly this conversation. It's actually who's allowing themselves to be subsumed into those systems, and who's actually conscious of, I'm here because it does pay the bills now, but I'm still going to speak up. I'm still going to challenge. I'm still going to find joy, to use your phrase.
Yeah.
And I think this is what this platform's all about, really, is trying to share experiences of, regardless of where you are, you do have a choice to reclaim joy, to reclaim agency in your own way. Yeah. And I wonder how you would challenge or build on that from your perspective.
No, I think that's right, Gary. And again, I think, there are different reasons for staying in corporate environments that maybe aren't healthy. And some of it is, people just need security, and there's very real limitations to what they may or may not be able to do because, they need a job or they need health insurance, whatever that might be. Mm-hmm. And I get that. And I think, to your point, even in those situations, there are, individuals can use that agency and try to find ways to say, okay, well, how can I still be joyful? How can I create something that I feel good about? And I think, I see in the circles I, tend to socialize in, or the circles I tend to move in, people who are, you hate to use the word quiet quitting because it seems so defeatist, right? It seems so like, again, like just the idea of quitting is I think wrong. But I think it's what they're doing is they're kind of getting better at separating, right? And it's not like, I think, in the past, people use terms like life balance and things like that. But I think in this world of, 2026, all of us as individuals are getting better at like kind of drawing firm boundaries or containment around, like, here's the things like I have to do in order to make a living, right? And that's real. We all experience that.
Yep.
And, but draw some containment around that and draw some boundaries around that and give what, feels right to give in order to make that relationship, symbiotic or make that relationship work for both parties. But in the rest of the time you have available, reclaim your agency, reclaim whether you love cooking, whether you love photography, whether you love, quilting, whether you love pickleball, whatever it is. But, I think we're in a world where, the idea of the contract between the company and the individual has been torn up from both sides. I think it was originally torn up from the corporate side. And I think, a lot of the workforce has come around to saying, okay, if that's the rules, that's fine. You've got me from 9 to 5, or you got me within these boundaries, but it's not really like heart and soul anymore, right? And there, again, look, there are probably very real exceptions to that, but I think that's largely what I'm seeing is we're getting better at compartmentalizing, and as the corporate world's getting better at looking at humans as commodities, I think humans are getting better at looking at the corporate world as something that occupies one space, and we do what we have to do in order to live the more kind of like, I think, enriched life that is up to us to choose and up to us to pursue.
Yeah, it's really pragmatic. No, it really resonates with my experience, to be honest, and with a lot of people on this platform so far. Actually, Tim, I think that it's funny because in the past, if I'm honest, I would have thought of compartmentalizing or finding these little boxes. I would have been like, that's really reductive, that's really negative. But I'm actually, my mind's opened up to that. Actually, it's not necessarily negative. Like you say, it's boundaried. It's actually, how do I consciously put these different spots or spaces of who I am or who I want to be, so that I'll never forget coming to you in your wonderful Kimberly's apartment a couple of years ago in San Diego, right? And just hearing that debate we had on joy, like that's the first time, Tim, I've been in that sort of discussion about the topic of joy, and it really hit me.
Yeah. Well, I agreed, and I still carry it forward to this day as well, and how I look at situations and look at opportunities. And I think what I would say is there was a time, probably 10 or 15 years ago, where a lot more people derived joy from work. A lot more people derived purpose from work. A lot more people derived meaning and identity from work. And I don't want to be pessimistic and skeptical about it, but I just think the corporate environment that exists in 2025 and 2026 makes that much more difficult, because I think corporations are sending the signal that the bottom line matters, the human beings don't. And the opportunity for joy and purpose, I'm not saying it's not there, but I'm saying it's harder to find. And I think it is the obligation for each one of us to find that ourselves, to find it outside of work, and not necessarily expect to tie our paycheck to our purpose anymore. And for people that can do that and are in that situation, good on them. That's fantastic. But I just don't see it as much or certainly in numbers. I think there was a time in the early 2010s, even before that, where I think there was there were corporations who were trying to find purpose. Unilever was a good example, right?
Yeah,
they were really trying to be a purposeful organization, and a lot of other ones. I don't see that as much anymore. And I think, the resulting workplace cultures, the resulting, and maybe COVID did a number on that as well, because it scattered people from offices. But, you can point to different root causes, but I think it's just, it's put us in a situation where just as individuals, we have a little bit more need and responsibility to ask those questions of how do I get that sense of identity, sense of joy, sense of purpose, if I'm not getting it from, the company I work for, or the organization I work for, or the career choices I made.
It's going to be remiss of me not to bring a certain book into this conversation. I'm sure you'll excuse it, and I'm sure that Kimberly Davis will excuse it. But I have, because I'd love for you, as part of this conversation, to explain a little bit about this super objective journey that you and Kimberly have been on as part of Brave Leadership. Anyone that's listening or watching, Kimberly Davis, the wonderful partner of Tim, wrote this book. It's in the second edition, Brave Leadership. But you and Kimberly have developed this super objective tool, which I've been through. And by the way, Tim, it's absolutely amazing. Like, it literally came out with it gave me a range of purpose statements that actually showed me who I'm here to become. And I mean that in a way that I've not been able to give language to before. That's how powerful I found the tool.
Good. I'm glad to hear that, Gary. And to give credit where credit was due, this is Kimberly's vision. This is something she's had a dream of doing for, well before the technology existed to do it. And in the last kind of year and a half, we got a chance to collaborate on it. So before I started writing screenplays, I was writing a lot of code, right? It's just a different kind of art form, if you will. But it was this idea of a lot of the work she's done has been on helping people get clear on their super objective. And that's what Brave Leadership is all about. And, she comes out of the theater world where the idea of a super objective is something actors have in order to really kind of immerse themselves in their role. But what the insight she had early on was, well, that, applies in life as well. And again, I think a lot of times, and she's even done, groups with corporations. I won't name the company where, she was doing this work, helping people find their super objective. And she's had like directors come up and say, no, their super objective is what I give them, right? Which is, kind of indicative of exactly what's wrong in a lot of environments. But, her work has been more at the individual level to say, hey, there are times the thing that really, motivates you and drives you in life and is innate in kind of what is your motor, aligns with the work you're doing. And there's times it's not, but it's up to kind of each individual to do the exploration around that. And her workshops and classes have been around helping people get clear on what it is and what she calls a super objective that really drives them and really kind of points them in a direction of what's really both how they can contribute and how they can feel like they're contributing a level that's so consistent with who they are. And so what we tried to do over the last 18 months is build out a tool that allows that program to have more reach. Right, that work that she's done to have more reach, and it's been fascinating, and it's not only from a product development perspective because we went through all the steps of product development of prototyping. Then you've got something brilliant, and then it hits the world, and you realize there's a lot of parts of it that aren't, and then you go through and fix those, and think you got something brilliant. You put it out in the world, and realize it's not there yet. And so all those things we went through together, but built something that really, I think, in a lot of ways. And she's very proud of, I'm very proud of, that can help people do this thing we've been talking about, which is get clear on the thing that really, helps them derive joy, helps them derive purpose. And again, maybe it aligns with the career choices they've made, maybe aligns with the organization for whom, they may be working with now. And maybe they can take what they've found as their super objective and apply it to the work they're doing. And maybe not. Maybe it points them a direction that says, maybe different choices in where I, choose to pursue my career will better align with who I am. But what we found from so many people who've taken it, Gary, and this is, I think, similar to the feedback you were just giving, is when they get to the end, people say, well, this is great because it puts words to what I've always kind of intuitively sensed, right? It puts language to something I felt, but I could never necessarily articulate. And just having that language and having 10 words that say this is my super objective, allows you on a daily or regular basis just to say, hey, am I doing things that are lined up with where I want to go, with the impact I want to have, right? And just be conscious about it. And if not, what are you going to do about that? And if so, how's that showing up? And so that's the feedback from so many people, is not like, I've never thought of this. It's, you've just helped me articulate something that's been back in my mind that either never took the time or never found the words to articulate. And by articulating it, really kind of unlocks for a lot of people and I hate to use the word permission because you don't give people permission, but they feel a sense of like, that they can act now with clarity and feel like, choices are available to them that they may not have seen or may not have let them make, before they did that.
Oh, it's amazing. For those that are just on listening and not watching, brave-leadership.com. Go and find Kimberly's book. Go and find the Super Objective tool. It really is as amazing as Tim and I are discussing.
The tool, Gary, is just now be brave. Just now be brave.com.
Now be brave. Now be brave.com. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And it's a free tool. It's open to anybody. So her goal when she started out was to just have the widest possible impact she can. Right, to get from working with hundreds of people or thousands of people, to 10x or 100x that is really what is her, essentially the heart of her super objective.
And on that note, I think it would be brilliant to finish this conversation today, Tim, with, if you don't mind, what's your super objective?
Well, it's right here on my phone. Funny you should ask, Gary. One of the things we built is a wallpaper that lets you, it's in the background now, but I've got you can't really see it, but it's the wallpaper behind my phone. But it's basically fuel the rebels who refuse to let the soulless giants win, right? It's the idea of fueling people who, it's all about, I kind of, again, the maverick in me, I don't want to see the big corporations who are just for profit win. I want to work with the small, the entrepreneurs, rebels inside of organizations to give them a path to do things that are outrageous, right? It's, again, what's at the heart of it is positive, but it's got a rebellious level in it too. And so, it's, for me, it's all about kind of finding the people who want to fight against the machine. And it's, again, not idealism. It's not anti-capitalist. It's just saying, how do you do capitalism in a way that's freaking outrageous and courageous and purpose-driven? And those are the people I want to work with, right? Those are the people I want to spend my time with, not someone who's just, cranking out Unilever's objective because, that's what, nothing wrong with it. Just not how I want to spend my time.
This is just, honestly, Tim, I knew we'd have a great conversation, but this is just amazing because what it's done, and I hope listeners who've heard other conversations, we don't have to sit here and talk about male, female, masculine, feminine to get to the point of what I believe in the Business of Healthy Masculinity is about. You've just modeled it, right? It's this conscious awareness that things can be better, more joyful, and less harmful.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Gary. And again, sometimes there's I think a time and a place for the gender conversation, and especially in that idea of like, how does gender messaging potentially lead us to behave in certain ways that aren't getting us where we want to go? But again, ultimately, I think for me, I don't think often around like, how do I be a better man? I just think, how do I do better as a person? And if sometimes that means leaving the baggage behind, and with what I'm doing now with writing, I have to let myself be vulnerable. I have to be able to think in both kind of, for male characters and female characters and put myself in their world. And so it's been, I think, a useful way to move past some of those stereotypes and restrictions that are in there. And so, I think, it's very, very worthwhile to root those out. But I think at the end of the day, for me, like the conversation of how we contribute is a bigger one.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Tim, thank you for joining me again, everyone. Tim,
thank you for
linkedin.com/Tim B. Sutton. Good luck with the play. The screenplay sounds very exciting. And the last thing I have to ask, because left it a bit too late, are you still doing marathons, Tim Sutton?
I am. Yeah. In 4 weeks, I'm running Tokyo. So I'm in the phase of training, which is 50 miles a week, 6 days a week. So I just ran 8 miles this morning before joining you. So so after Tokyo, I'm going to have a little bit of a break. I've done Chicago, Berlin, London, which was brilliant, and now Tokyo. So I am. I started this when I think well into my 50s before I ever ran more than 3 miles. But it's been transformational. I think it's one of those outlets that helps not only be physically healthy, but just more grounded and everything else. Because when you run on average 7-8 miles a day, you got a lot of time to reflect, a lot of time to think. And so, that's been a gift in addition to, kind of the physical benefits of running.
Amazing. Well, good luck in Tokyo, Tim. Thanks for your time. And thanks everybody for joining us. Take care.
Thanks, Gary. Cheers.